Left behind? Daniel had always been proud to serve his country. Ever since he was a young boy, he had dreamed of becoming a soldier, inspired by the stories his grandfather used to tell him about honor, courage, and sacrifice. When the time came, Daniel enlisted, and with the unwavering support of his wife Sarah, he set off to serve overseas. It was a difficult decision, but they were a team. Sarah assured him they would make it through, and that she would be waiting for him no matter how long it took. The months that followed were challenging. Daniel's days were filled with the dangers and pressures of combat, while Sarah held down the fort at home. They kept in touch through letters, emails, and the occasional video call, though the distance between them felt vast. Still, every message from Sarah kept Daniel going. She told him about her days, her work, her plans, and how much she missed him. Daniel would lie awake at night, imagining the day he would come home to her, picturing her waiting for him with open arms. After nearly 2 years of deployment, Daniel finally received the news he'd been waiting for. He was going home. He was ecstatic, counting down the days, filled with hope and excitement. He didn't tell Sarah immediately, wanting to surprise her. He imagined her joy, the look on her face when he showed up at their doorstep. The thought of holding her again was all he could think about. Finally, the day arrived. Daniel's heart raced as he stepped off the plane and took his first breath of home air. He made his way through the crowd, avoiding any calls to family and friends so he could focus on one thing, seeing Sarah. He took a cab to their home, rehearsing what he would say, picturing every detail of their reunion. But when he arrived, something felt off. The house looked different. There were new flowers in the garden, the mailbox had a different name on it, and even the curtains were not the ones he remembered. Confused, Daniel walked up the steps and knocked on the door, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. After a few moments, the door opened, but instead of Sarah, a man stood there, looking at Daniel with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone polite but guarded. Daniel was taken aback. I'm looking for Sarah," he said, struggling to make sense of the situation. This is our house." The man's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. He hesitated, then said, "You must be Daniel. Sarah told me about you." Before Daniel could ask anything further, he heard footsteps behind the man, and there she was. Sarah, standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock, and something else he couldn't quite place. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't reach for him. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking, "I came back. I thought you'd be waiting for me." She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. The silence between them was heavy, filled with 1,000 unspoken words. Finally she spoke, her voice soft. "Daniel, I didn't know if you would ever come back." Daniel felt a pang of hurt, his mind reeling. "What do you mean? I wrote to you, I called. I never stopped thinking about you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she took a deep breath. "I waited, Daniel. I waited for so long. But as the months went by, I started to lose hope. I thought maybe you weren't coming back, that something might have happened. I was alone, and I didn't know how to move on." The man standing beside her placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Daniel's stomach churned as he realized what was happening. This man wasn't just a friend or a neighbor. He was Sarah's new partner. His chest felt tight as he looked at her, disbelief clouding his face. "So, you moved on?" Sarah's face crumpled with guilt and sadness. "It wasn't easy, Daniel. I loved you, so much. But I was lost without you, and over time, I met Mark. He helped me through some of the hardest days, and we became close." Daniel took a step back, feeling as though the ground was slipping out from under him. He had imagined this day 1,000 times, but never like this. He had come home to start his life with Sarah again, but it seemed she had already started a new one without him. "Did you even want me to come back?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's face was etched with pain. "Of course, I wanted you to come back, Daniel. I never wanted this, but I didn't know how to hold on anymore. I had to find a way to keep living, even if it meant letting go." Daniel's mind raced with memories. The laughter, the love, the promises they'd made to each other. He had gone to war for them, believing that their love would survive anything. But now, it felt as if everything he had fought for had been stripped away. Mark spoke up, his voice calm but respectful. "Daniel, I can't imagine what you've been through. I know this is painful, and I'm sorry. I never wanted to come between you and Sarah, but please know that I care about her deeply." Daniel clenched his fists, struggling to control his emotions. The anger, the heartbreak, and the sense of betrayal were overwhelming. He wanted to lash out, to yell, to tell Mark to leave, but he knew deep down that it wouldn't change anything. Sarah had made her choice, even if it was one born from loneliness and grief. Taking a deep breath, Daniel looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with sadness. "I gave everything for us, Sarah. I never stopped believing we'd be together." Sarah's tears fell freely now. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I wish things were different. I never wanted to hurt you. I will always care about you. But things have changed." The words cut deep, but Daniel knew that nothing he could say would turn back time. His love for Sarah was real, but it wasn't enough to undo the past, to erase the pain they had both endured. He realized that war had taken more from him than he'd ever imagined. Not just time, but the life he had once cherished. After a long silence, he nodded, his face set with quiet resignation. "I hope you're happy, Sarah. I hope he makes you happy." With those final words, Daniel turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. He had returned home to find himself a stranger in his own life, left behind by the one person he thought would always wait for him. As he left the neighborhood, Daniel felt a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. His life had changed in ways he couldn't control, but he knew he had to find a way forward. He would carry the memories, the love he had for Sarah, but he couldn't stay trapped in a past that was no longer his.